Setting up. Great. So Abhiram, just check if you're on live.
Yeah, no. Yeah, we are on live.
We're on live. Okay,
Madhu
great.
is visible. Yeah.
Great. Yes.
Awesome.
Go ahead, Madhu.
Yes, let's kickstart the panel discussion. Yeah. Good evening, one and all, both in India as well as the Netherlands. It's evening on both sides of the world. And during this time of social distancing and pandemic, it is incredible that we can stay connected with each other using social media and technology. So, right in that same sense, I would like to, call the panel discussion officially open. And we have two very incredible guests here with us today, Dr. Emma Former and Rama Subramaniam, both of whom approach the concept of social enterprise from their respective career standpoints, one from research and the other one from the practice. And especially during this time of the global pandemic, the focus on sustainability, the focus on social change has become ever more relevant. And the research suggests that millennials and later generations of youth have increasingly prioritized sustainability as a living choice and as their choice of career. However, the career in the impact space still remains at a nascent stage. Therefore, it is my privilege to interact with two fantastic individuals who can take us through what it is to develop a career in the social enterprise side. Dr. Emma Former is my professor from University of Groningen in the Netherlands, and I've had the fortune to attend various courses under her. And she has a very unique gift of breaking down complex topics into simple, digestible bits of information, as you shall all be seeing today. I also got to attend one of her presentations on social entrepreneurship during a youth event before the Corona era set in, so BC, right? And it was right then and there that I decided that I really wanted to get her to talk to the audience back home in India, and yeah, here she is. Thank you so much for agreeing to come, ma'am. And the other individual, the other guest that we have today is Rama Subramaniam, or he's also called as Ramanna within Talent Quest for India. And he's always been passionate about creating social change right from his grade school. And he set up an NGO called Talent Quest for India, which is primarily run by the youth. The organization aspires to create socially responsible leaders. And ever since high school, he's been running this organization, mentoring young people. And currently, he also runs the Youth Entrepreneurial Mindset Workshop, right? And it is my privilege to sit back and learn from the discussion between these two fantastic individuals. So without further ado, I would like to call the panel discussion open, right? So the first question that I would like to pose to both our speakers today is, how did you come across the concept of social enterprise, and why do you personally find it interesting? Dr. Emma, if we could request you to go first.
Hi, Madhu. Thank you so much for inviting me, giving me the opportunity to share some of my experiences and research findings, hopefully. The concept of social entrepreneurship, how did I come across it? I have to think a long way back, actually. So when I completed my PhD, which was on sort of mainstream entrepreneurship, I got an email from a professor in the UK who said, look, I've heard about you from some networks, some colleagues about your thesis. Sounds really interesting. I recently won a grant for doing research on social entrepreneurship. Why don't you look into the job opening and see if it's something for you. So then that was not the professor I actually applied with, but then through the whole network, I then applied to this job. It's the first time I ever heard about social entrepreneurship. So for me, it was a completely new topic when I applied for a postdoc position, and it got involved in a research project on social entrepreneurship. And it was an eye-opening experience to me, I have to say, because working on mainstream entrepreneurship for the 4 years before, I had not really even considered the phenomenon of social entrepreneurship. Of course, I had come across entrepreneurs who had been concerned with social goals or environmental goals in their businesses, but they were not necessarily putting those goals as a central focus of their business. And now in my new research project, I really had to shift gears and look at a different population of entrepreneurs who are really starting businesses because they want to solve a social problem or an environmental problem. And that's a real difference in terms of how a business is run, how opportunities are being explored and implemented. So for me, that was also a really learning experience to see how this different sort of a breed of entrepreneurs, if you will, how they go about setting up their businesses and running their businesses. And ever since I got involved in that research project, I have stuck with the topic because it is so fascinating to me how people decide to dedicate basically their lives to solving issues that matter to us all. So they put the collective good before their own financial benefits. And I think that is, to me, a fascinating topic. And maybe it's my idealistic dream of a better world, but it's something that I really am passionate about researching.
Thank you so much for sharing that, ma'am. It's quite inspiring. Ram, would you like to add something to that? Why do you find
why I find social entrepreneurship interesting, right? So so way back in when I was in 11th standard or so, I'd say when we saw in college, we saw that most of the students have this stage fear and fear over speaking English. So that's where we thought that we need to build up a model. That's where we came up with this express model, to converting Rajnikant punch dialogues into that, and then making sure they are overcoming the fear of stage fear. So what I was not aware that one starting point is gonna take away into a social entrepreneurial model. But in the coming years, I actually hear the word social entrepreneurship per se when I was in leadership journey in Karnataka, where I met Infosys Narayana Murthy or Akshay Patra. The terms I got to know when Agastya. So when I visited them, that's where the real-time experience of meeting with social entrepreneurs, I actually got that term, what we are actually doing. And so down the line, I understood that the social entrepreneurship it's all start from your community, from your home. The starting point is empathize. So that is something that need to be started on. And why I'm excited about more is you see India being with a huge demography, and a lot of youngsters are there, and now it's high time that we solve the youngsters take up the responsibility rather than just complaining about a particular challenges, and take that up, see what is it around, empathize, and then they need to move on finding out a solution, and rather than a job provider rather than a job seeker. So that's where the changing things, I think. So that's fine me. For me, that's why I started taking even youth and social mindset workshop, because I see the power of volunteerism converting to entrepreneurship. So the volunteerism now, as they've been doing on ground, they are now seeing what is the problem in their community, what is the challenges. Now it's time for taking volunteerism to the next level, where they become a social entrepreneur. So that's why the whole concept of it and the whole thing of it is really, really fascinating to me. Yeah, thanks, Mark.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Emma, I think we have a lot of audience here who who are hearing the term social enterprise for the first time. So I would request if it would be okay for you to explain the concept of social enterprise for our audience a bit more in a more accessible manner.
Is it okay if I share something on my screen?
Definitely, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, I am disabled from sharing my screen.
Oh, is it 1 second? No problem. Yeah. Maybe I will make you the host and then you can now share it. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much. So this is basically an image that I often show people when I have to explain what the their basic idea of social entrepreneurship or social enterprises, because to me this picture is really shows both ingredients, if you will, of a social enterprise. So it's social on the one hand and it's entrepreneurial on the other hand. So in order to have a social enterprise, you need to have both, right? So a social enterprise is a business that was set up with a social mission, and a social mission is generally aimed at vulnerable people. So these can be people who have a certain disability, or they have a certain history of drug abuse or homelessness, or people that have had bad experiences in their life, in their youth, which makes it more difficult for them to sort of participate in mainstream society. It can also be poor people in general. So all these types of groups that have a more difficult position in society tend to be sort of the beneficiaries of social enterprises. Social missions of social enterprise are usually phrased in such a way that they have as a goal to empower vulnerable groups. So it's not their idea or their intention to make people dependent on the social enterprise. It is their goal to empower the people, to make sure that there's some sort of transfer of skills or abilities or resources that enables them to sort of become independent again and have a better position in life. So it's really about empowerment. It's about creating social value for the collective good. So any value that is being created in the enterprise goes beyond the entrepreneur and the business itself, and is valuable to wider society. And lastly, I would say a lot of the social missions that I have encountered in the social entrepreneurs that I spoke to, they include some element of system change. So they would always say, well, I don't want to just help the group of vulnerable people. I want to change society, or I want to change certain laws and regulations, or I want to influence government. So they always have some, or a lot of the time they have some sort of systemic change element in their mission statement. So that's really the social component of social enterprise. And then you have the entrepreneurial component that really entails more the business side of things. So this is why these organizations are not charities or foundations, but they're really businesses, because they have this entrepreneurial dimension. So they have a product or a service that they trade on the market. This can be quite innovative. So often they have quite innovative products or services that help tackle social or environmental problems. They take risks, so they have investors. They can have their own money invested, own capital invested. They can also have government grants invested that, if they would fail to deliver, would risk their name and reputation. So there's always an element of risk taking, and there's also the element of opportunity, right? So they're always searching their environment, scanning their environment for new opportunities to innovate, to enter new markets, to make more business, or make more surplus for the social good. So there's also this element of being opportunity focused. And that, in short, combining those two dimensions, for me, that really is what a social entrepreneur does, or what a social enterprise is. Shall
Thank
I,
you so much. Thank you
shall,
so much for that.
shall I stop my screen share so that you can, let's see how I do that.
Uh,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, Ram, uh, yeah, thank you. So now then it places my next question perfectly. So now we've seen what a social enterprise is. So next, how do we? What are the key ingredients, or how do I say, the mindset characteristics of people that are social entrepreneurs, right? What are the characteristics, or what are the traits that you see? Some of the important traits, the mindsets that they have. Uh, Dr. Ahmed, that was a question to you. So yeah, sorry. What are the key mindset or the personality traits that you see are important for social entrepreneurs in order for them to succeed?
It's a good question, interesting question. It's very difficult to answer because in entrepreneurship research in general, research has been done about personality traits or character traits of people who become entrepreneurs. This research, it tends to be inconclusive, so it is not necessarily sort of proven that entrepreneurs are, their personalities are necessarily different. There are some things that are pointing towards more entrepreneurial inclinations or entrepreneurial orientation. So, for example, we generally see that people who are entrepreneurs are willing to take risks. They have a particular ability to, for example, combine knowledge fields. So, for example, they are trained in a particular field of knowledge and they come across someone else who is trained in another field of knowledge, and they can immediately see crossovers or linkages between those fields. So they have a knack for linking different knowledge fields. And another thing is that in the study of entrepreneurial mindset, there's this theory that exists between or contrast that exists between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset, and entrepreneurs tend to have a growth mindset. So these are the type of people who tend to see the world as full of possibilities. They if something fails, they don't see it as, oh, I failed, I cannot do something, but they tend to see it as, oh, I failed, I'm going to change something and try again. So they have a different approach to their environment, if you will. So that's what I can say about a sort of a general entrepreneurial mindset. And a specific thing about social entrepreneurs, what I've seen in my research, but this is by no means a sort of a cross case observation that holds everywhere and anywhere, but what I have seen a lot is that social entrepreneurs tend to develop their business from personal experience. So they, for example, a clear example is a company that focuses on integrating people with autism into the labor market. Some of these businesses have founders that have autistic or people with autism in their families. So their children or nieces or nephews might have be on the autism spectrum, and therefore they see this as an experience that's close to them, that has inspired or motivated them to actually try to tackle the problem of people with autism being often having difficulties entering the labor market. So this is an example, and I think that actually happens quite a lot. You see social entrepreneurs acting from personal experience.
Thank you. Yeah. So thank you for answering that question. So that now, since the topic of the webinar or panel discussion is youth and social enterprise, I would like to ask both of the panelists, you know, talk about what kind of trends, or what how do they see young people being involved in the social entrepreneurship movement, and how can we engage more young people into social enterprise? Ram, I think probably you can talk about your experience.
Yeah. So, thank you, Professor. That one point that you said on, the social entrepreneurs, they integrate with personal experience, that is something, which I've been seeing even in our TQI story. It is all started way back in 2020, 2010, because it's because of, I understood the power of non-judgmental listening and appreciation that was needed in the youth. So with that core concept only, it is all started. So we started going to where we want to connect the local college students to the local school students, where they become a mentor in the villages for the in a government school. So, and I can totally relate it. As you say, the social entrepreneurship is always, it will integrate with, it will start off with that personal experience or what they see, what they learn it. So to answer to a previous question also, Madhu, the trait or the personality, and now integrating with the question of you right now saying, how youth can be trained. So again, I'll go back, I would like to quote what Bill Trinton of Ashoka says, he always focus again, empathizing. So empathizing, even in design thinking, the first part is actually empathy. So I would think so. The social entrepreneurship is a whole thing comes out when everyone started empathizing what is happening around them. So that is something and an important trait I would see, to start something as a social entrepreneurship, to become a social entrepreneur. And the course that we do on youth and social entrepreneur mindset workshop, and I interact with a lot of youth, so it is when we ask this question, what are the challenges that you see, or what are the challenges that you see in a community? It is, that point itself is, reflecting and making them to introspect, what is happening around in itself. It is something, it's enlightening, it's very enriching. And after that, when they get on group as youth, on discussing on that particular issue or a challenge, and then trying to work out, as professor said, the cross, each and every one come to a table with a different kind of skill set. And when they all come together for a particular challenge and work out a solution towards and start discussing towards, I think so that will slowly started, transgressing towards starting something. So, no, to quote one example, from India, the Padman, Arunachalam Muruganandam, who has been working extensively on, the low-cost sanitary napkins, where his aim is to, make many. It is only 7% of the women in India are actually using sanitary napkins. There are 93%, and then he wants to create more jobs with that. So, he started off with this empathizing because he saw his wife, using a dirty cloth. So it's all started, with the personal experience, and that move on, into a bigger social enterprise, where he started, going across, setting low-cost sanitary napkin units where the women are actually running that. So even take the bridgeman of India, Girish Bharatwaj, when he saw that, when two villages can't be connected because there is a river between, he went on to build bridges connecting villages. So he's called the bridgeman of India. He built around 127 bridges all around the states. So that's all, coming back, taking the points from professor, it's all social entrepreneurship. The first trait I would say is that to look around, empathize, come together, bring in your skills, and then, trying to discuss more and trying to, find out a, solution to it, and understand from the perspective of the community rather than we rushing to the solution. So, that is something very important. When we identify the problem, the next, empathizing, the next is something where we understand, talk, in the research thing, professor might add more, on qualitative and quantitative research about it. But that is something very important after identifying, empathizing, identifying a problem, and then a research about it, and then move towards, trying to find a solution. Yeah. So that is something, or the three things that I say it's really important for a youth to start off. And I see there are a lot of youth are interested, they're talking about it. They just need a right platform. There are a lot of opportunities available. There are a lot of research shows, even a British Council research shows that, India has a good potential of social entrepreneurship youth, but lack of training, lack of awareness, lack of risk taking, these are the few of the challenges that the youth are actually facing into start of something. So, maybe at the end of it, Madhu, I can show it up, saying that what are the fellowships and what are the different kind of opportunities available, maybe at the end of it, for a takeaway for the people, for the youth who are attending this. Yeah.
Sure. Sure. I'm sorry, I should have notified both our speakers because we have questions arriving as the discussion is flowing. And Dr. Emma, I think we have a lot of questions coming up specifically for you. And it's also interesting because both of we have speakers from the global north and the global south. And
Madhu,
there's a question related.
Madhu, you're breaking a bit.
Okay. Is it better now?
Yeah.
There's a heavy rain at my side. Yeah. So there's a specific question to Dr. Emma. So one of them asked, the Netherlands is a developed country. The approach to the concept of social enterprise, is it different in the way it is being practiced in the global north and in the global south?
That's a really good question and really interesting. And I think it actually points to a gap in entrepreneurship and especially social entrepreneurship literature, more specifically, that there is definitely research being done on social entrepreneurship in non-Western context, absolutely. But sometimes the linkages between how do we link what we see in non-Western countries to what we're seeing in Western countries, that link is sometimes not made explicit, or it's not necessarily being explained by the people who are doing the research. So I think that is a really fascinating question, because you would actually need a comparative research design to actually say, okay, let's take some social enterprises from the global north and the global south that are fairly comparable in several ways, and see how they do things. Do we see differences? Do we see differences in how they organize themselves? Do we see differences in how they create impact, for example? Now, of course, some of the earliest examples of social enterprises come from India, for example. So Grameen Bank is not from India; it's from, I think it was Pakistan, or what, am I right? Bangladesh, yeah. So actually, some of the prime examples of the social enterprises come from non-Western context, right? So I would just say even though the Western context is sometimes seen as, okay, a lot of action is happening there in terms of social entrepreneurship. Yes, that's true, but a lot of it is also built on things that we have learned from non-Western context. And I think one difference we can also see is that in the Western context, a lot of social entrepreneurship also develops from organizations that used to be charities and foundations that are now developing into social enterprises. And I don't know how that is in the global south or non-Western context, but I think that's slightly different. But correct me if I'm wrong. And I think that's one of an interesting difference that could mean also something for how organizations are organized and how they are creating impact. So that's one thing. And I think also there are some studies who show that in non-Western context, we see more community enterprises. So enterprises that are really grassroots, in the sense that they are founded by and run by local communities, whereas in the Western context, the focus is more on individual social entrepreneurs. So I think that difference between individual and community could also be something that could be explored more in research. But yes, absolutely. I think it's an excellent question, because it points to a lot of things that we still don't know from a scientific or academic standpoint. So I would be really interesting also to learn more about the differences.
It's very interesting because for me, I was able to remember the performance course where we were talking about frugal innovation, especially in countries like India and Africa, where would you mind elaborating on the concept of frugal innovation? I personally found it quite interesting, but I think the audience too would find it very interesting. The concept of frugal innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. So frugal innovation is a phenomenon that we see sometimes in not just social enterprises, but just to stick with the example of social enterprises. So when social enterprises in developing economies they engage in frugal innovation is, for example, when they take ideas that are from more advanced economic context, and they actually strip it down of all the technical complexities to a much more simplified, easier to implement in the local context product. So the example that I always use in my class is the example of this clay fridge, right? So the idea of a fridge to keep your perishable goods fresh. In a lot of developing economies where electricity is unreliable, a sort of a standard mainstream fridge would not always function properly. One can use a clay fridge that actually can keep perishable goods fresh for up to 3 days without electricity. So this idea of developing something that sort of has the same function and perhaps even the same form or shape as a standard product, but actually functions differently in practice and much better in specific context. That's the idea of frugal innovation.
Thank you for answering that. We do have a few more people here in our panel discussion, and we have someone called Bharat who's currently pursuing he's completed his master's in international development from Galway, and he has a few questions from today's discussion. Bharat, I think you can post your questions if they are ready.
Thanks, Madhu. Dr. Farmer, thank you so much for being here. I have a few questions. And
Bharat, you can come on video. Yeah, you can come on video. If you
I'm not a panelist, so I would rather not be on video.
That's okay.
So
thanks for joining from Ireland, Bharat.
Pleasure. It was a very interesting topic. I wouldn't have missed it. Dr. Farmer, I was actually, during my program, was looking at social enterprises in conflict-hit Bosnia-Herzegovina context. So we were looking into understanding how social enterprises are being used to bring about a change. And it's a country which was recently war hit, and it is recovering out of the war situation. So I was trying to understand something from that perspective. And the most common thing that we came across was how bootstrapped these social enterprises were and how discouraging it was for any cooperative or an individual to come up with innovative idea for converting that into a social enterprise. And I'm just talking about establishing an enterprise, not even thinking about scale here, because funding was so crunch. And I'm sure funding is the crunch for most of the social enterprises worldwide. And in such a situation, my question here is, considering now that we are stuck by COVID-19 and governments world over are taking a lot of austere measures, how should social enterprises steer themselves around times of austerity?
Just to clarify, was your question, how should they scale themselves?
No, how should they steer themselves around times of austerity? Because the most common source of funding for social enterprises are governments, first and foremost, and then maybe investors, then come impact investors, and so on and so forth in the hierarchy. But mostly government funds social enterprises in every country. And in terms of austerity, the first and the foremost thing that does get affected are such enterprises. So how should social enterprises navigate around such times of austerity?
I think it's a brilliant question. And it's also a question that I think I would not have a straightforward answer to. And it is also a question that's actually being asked at the moment. When you look at the calls for special issues in journals, in academic journals, this is actually a call that you come across quite often because of the global pandemic, is how do, well, businesses in general, but social enterprises also specifically, how do they maintain themselves in times of crisis? Because you know, you said it yourself, these businesses, these enterprises tend to be bootstrapped already beyond imagination, right? So you have often no idea how they actually get things done with such limited resources that they have. So being already bootstrapped to the limit, if you can say it like this, and then coming into a situation where government funds might be drying up, or you know, your partners that you usually collaborate with, they come into financial or organizational troubles, so you come into quite difficult situations. Yes. So how do they handle themselves in times of austerity? How can they maintain themselves? I think one of the things that social enterprises have going for them, of course, is that especially in times of austerity, people tend to also be more sensitive to social problems, right? Because they're more attuned to it, because social problems might be more in the news, more in the media, or just more on the radar, because times are hard, more people are getting into difficulty. So the social problems in question might be under a magnifying glass and more in people's attention and awareness. So this could actually mean for social enterprises that they could penetrate markets better, right? Because they are the ones who are trying to actually tackle social problems. So that might actually mean that they are people become more aware of them and the work that they do. So that might be one way of actually doing well or relatively well in times of austerity, just because you are one of the ones that are trying to tackle crisis situations and problems. That's one thing that immediately comes to my mind. And the other one is that in times of austerity, your competition is also having a hard time, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not just social enterprises who are having a hard time, but it's all SMEs, right? So yeah. Let's not just talk. Let's leave large corporations out of it for a moment. But SMEs tend to be the hardest hit in time of crisis and austerity. So the competition is also dwindling. So that's one way to also look at it, right? As a social enterprise, you stand out, and you have a unique voice and a unique mission. And if your competition is also having a hard time, then this also actually might mean that they are not so much in the picture anymore. But besides those 2 points, I would not have a straight up answer for your question.
Thank you so much for that. Actually, it does make sense in multiple ways. But you know, this actually ring. Am I allowed to ask another question?
Yeah. Please, Bharat. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So, another thing that
I mean, it's a free.
Another thing that that did strike at me is how the structure itself of social enterprises or the social economy impedes promotion of innovation, because considering social enterprises are bootstrapped and always looking for funding, they always would want to make sure their funding source is secure. And when they are driven by such a motive, you think they would risk experimenting or innovating beyond what they know will be a sure shot source of revenue generation for them? Do you think the structure of social economy itself impedes promoting innovation and risk and experimentation?
I think that's another really good question. I think it is very context dependent, because the social economy or the way social enterprises function or their place in the economy differs country by country. So it's sort of difficult to say how it works everywhere.
But if you have to contextualize into the Western Europe, how do you say out of the Western Europe context?
It really depends. I think it depends also a little bit on the sort of founding idea of a social enterprise, right? So if a social enterprise is founded on a completely or quite an innovative product or service, then they already have this element of innovation sort of from the point of departure. So they wouldn't necessarily feel held back by the context. I think if they can function as a mainstream enterprise, with the exception that they have a social mission because their product or service actually innovative and they have market demand, I think I don't see many limitations to their innovative capabilities. If they would, however, provide a service or product that's not so much innovative, but I would say more an incremental innovation. So it's more like a process innovation because they do things slightly differently, or they have a different way of structuring their operations compared to mainstream enterprises. Then I would say yes. If they're heavily dependent on government grants or funding or charity donations, then they might feel restricted in their innovative capabilities. But again, I think it's completely context dependent, and also depending on the sort of innovative nature of the enterprise itself and the sector that they operate in. So it's very difficult to give sort of a one size fits all answer to that question.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Bharat, and thank you, Dr. Emma. I think, so now that we've discussed about the financial challenges and the financial hurdles, there's another interesting question that has come up. I think I would direct this to Ram. So one of our viewers has asked, what is the most challenging hurdle to be a social entrepreneur apart from finance? Ram, if you could answer that.
I would say finance come at the end. So, so many of the, when I interact with, when I take this Youth and Social Entrepreneur workshop, what's stopping them, they're asking like, the financial part of it. So we know the whole TQI is running, it's all friends, bootstrap, crowdsource, and has been running. So finance, to be a start, finance comes the end. So, that will anyways, there are a lot of opportunities, there are a lot of good souls. TQI has been running because a lot of good souls who are ready to, taken and donated. But yeah, the most challenging thing, even with a lot of research, and says that, specifically I'm talking about Indian context, the youth mindset has always been a job seeker. So, the whole ecosystem of the risk taking, the risk taking thing is not been, that predominant, when you are, even right now, I am a part-time social entrepreneur. If you say, I have a job and I am a part-time social entrepreneur, because that amount of, having that, okay, am I secure enough? Am I secure? So, that kind of, mindset is still not, shattered or broken in the, Indian context. So maybe the risk-taking, capability will be the biggest hurdle, I would say, for the youth. But once they cross that, once they see things that, then it's all trial and error with the ways, the learning, getting feedbacks and taking forward, because a lot of youth are actually ready, but what is stopping them is that risk taking ability. Because we have been bounded to this IT sector boom, a service sector boom in the last 10 years in India. I would say that that pushed a lot of youth force into the service sector base. Even though who really wants to start up something, they are pushed on engineering, the boom of engineering, the boom of IT service sector in India. That I would also say that the job seeking mentality have been more, and entrepreneurship risk taking is the biggest hurdle, I think. So right now slowly the nature is taking, a lot of startups of coming in. But again, one of the things which again when you ask this hurdle on the startup ecosystem in India, I would again say that it's important to bringing a lot of product startup rather than a service startup. That's in the Indian context that professor said of frugal innovation of, she quoted an example of the refrigerator. And, to all Indian audience who is seeing this, I need to quote a movie example from Three Idiots, which is happening way there long in Ladakh. And there is a movie in Tamil which came in Hero, where it shows a local community innovating for themselves. But if you see the bigger picture, it is all happening at the local patches. It's all happening here, here, and there. If you see the product innovation, stuff, it's not a big boom, and there is a lot of opportunity given the frugal innovation mindset for India. So that's where I would ask the youth, I would urge the youth to think about finding a solution for the local challenges with the local materials, make it more self-sustaining, leaning back to what Mahatma Gandhi said, the Swaraj of making the village economy more sustainable, rather than looking outward for an urban center to feed you, rather than you create a lot of local self-sustaining units. That is something, the path ahead. Thank you, Madhu.
Thank you, Ram, for answering the question. So we would be closing the discussion in a few minutes, but before that, we would like to get some concrete takeaways from this panel discussion. So I'd like to hear from both the panelists. What do they think are some of the critical steps that we as a society need to take to engage more youth in the social entrepreneurship movement? Dr. Emma, if you could go first.
Yes, thank you, Madhu. Interesting statement. I think my co-panelist already mentioned this earlier, and I think it's an excellent point. There is a lot of latent youth entrepreneurship in society, right? And I think that holds for the global north and the global south. There's many young people who would actually have the desire or the goal to become an entrepreneur, but they lack experience, or they lack skills, or they lack the network to actually get things started. So going from a latent entrepreneur to a nascent or a starting entrepreneur is actually, that's quite a big step. And I think there are ways to stimulate this and to help young people get into entrepreneurship. I would just say again, from a scientific or academic standpoint, there is some conflicting evidence on whether actually entrepreneurial education and specifically maybe social entrepreneurial education, whether that actually stimulates people to become more entrepreneurial. But there is some tentative evidence that teaching young people about entrepreneurship, creating awareness, that was also said before, creating awareness, and also teaching entrepreneurial skills. So the things that I said before about growth mindset versus fixed mindset, entrepreneurs tend to have growth mindset, but growth mindset is not something that you are born with necessarily. It is also something that can be taught to you, right? So if you have grown up in an environment where a fixed mindset tends to be taught, it might be difficult to move yourself to a growth mindset, but actually it is trainable, it is possible. So training yourself to look for opportunities, training yourself to see setbacks as learning opportunities, training yourself to learn from others, to see feedback as a growing opportunity. All those things can actually be trained. So I think entrepreneurial skills should not just be about, the skills that you need to actually run a business, or things like accountancy or HRM or what have you. It should actually be more those abstract soft skills about what does it mean to have an entrepreneurial mindset. And I think when we can teach, and that's something actually you can teach from very young onwards. So you can start in primary schools with this. And if children are more attuned to this growth mindset and thinking of themselves as being entrepreneurial in other aspects of life, right? So being entrepreneurial does not necessarily mean always starting your business, but it can from a young age mean being independent, being creative, being proactive, not being afraid to try new things, not being afraid of failure. All those things can be taught from a young age. And I think if we start with young children to teach them those valuable skills, then we might be setting them up for an entrepreneurial future. And I think that could be something that educational systems could incorporate more.
Yeah. You're on mute, Madhu. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Yeah, I'm that was what I wanted to say.
Yeah. You're on mute, Madhu. Yeah. Yeah. Great. So, the professor beautifully said, what are the points that need to be there in the education system. So looking back, I'm just introspecting what, we TQI has been doing when we ask our youngsters in each of the district to, take a responsibility, create an event planner, and then see what are the problems and come up with that solution. I think so. Entrepreneurial mindset, it's all about, thinking creatively. At the first point, I would say the risk taking, and we should provide an ecosystem for students to fail. I think so. That is something that been there for a long time, because students the fear towards the failure or accepting the failures, that ecosystem should be really given. And I think so. I think so. I don't know, because in Western, I think so, there is some kind of ecosystem for accepting failure and learn. But here, the students are more afraid towards failure, and that ecosystem need to be created by, by in the home, by parents and in the teachers and in the college system and even in the society, for saying that it's okay to fail. It's okay to fail, because an entrepreneur, it's all first risk taking and then failing and then, taking a lesson from back and bouncing back, So I think so, accepting the failure, ready to take failure in a good constructive way. I think so that ecosystems to build in. And on the education, teaching young students, and professor said, it's important in the young age itself to make them creative. And in few of the models, right, we TQI focuses on through, on our Kana project or our social skill project that we take, and we're already doing it. And I'm so happy when it was taking back, I would say the Delhi government have actually come up, with an entrepreneurial, modeling calculated into the government syllabus for the school students. So there are a lot of things popping up in India. They were to build an ecosystem for the, young people at the starting point to, see what are the things that they can do it. So I would say it's with the start with the home, with the parents, then move on to the college and school, and then with the government. So, all three levels, that the ecosystem need to be built for youngsters to, say that it's okay to fail, it's okay to try, and create beautiful things for the environment and the people. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We have one last question, and I think this question particularly ties the whole discussion beautifully. At least that is what I feel. So the question is, how important is collaboration and networking to social enterprises, especially in the context of global north and global south? How do we, how important is collaboration and networking to move the different approaches to social enterprise across this divide? Dr. Emma, if you would go first, and then Ram.
I think that's a really interesting question. I think it's context dependent. One of the things I have seen in my research is that social enterprises, they collaborate for different reasons. One of the reasons is resources. Those can be financial or otherwise, right? So it can also be knowledge, skills, And this is exactly because of the reason we discussed before, because they are so bootstrapped and they have such a limited resources. They always have to make these difficult decisions on how to allocate resources. That collaborating with other social enterprises or with mainstream commercial enterprises or with government organizations actually helps them in accessing financial capital, knowledge, and skills that they could not obtain single-handedly. So that's one main reason for collaboration. So it's hugely important. Another important reason that we saw for collaboration is actually legitimacy, right? So associating yourself with a well-known organization, whether it's a mainstream commercial enterprise or whether it's a well-known social enterprise, associating yourself with an entity like this really helps boost your legitimacy. So it sort of signals to the outside world, look, these people are taking me seriously, so you should also take me seriously as a business, right? So that is another very important reason that we saw. A third important reason is scaling. So sometimes a social enterprise has a really good model, a really good business model, or really good formula for creating impact, but they don't necessarily have the resources to scale their solution or their innovation. And they actually might simply engage in collaborating with other organizations, say, here is our solution, here is our business model, here is our idea, please take it to wherever you are in your context and implement it there. And I think that's one of the things that fascinates me so much about social enterprises, that this willingness to collaborate, this willingness to share for the collective good. I think that is so valuable, and it is something that you see a lot in the social enterprise sector. So I think those are the three main reasons that I have seen in my research for social enterprises to collaborate. And it's hugely important for individual social enterprises, but also as a collective on how to create impact. Collaboration is really, really important. So let's see what my colleague has to say. I'm curious from practice perspective if this sort of meets the reality.
Yeah, so thank you, Professor. You know, it's as social enterprise, the whole ecosystem is in it. Social capital is really important. You know, the whole social capital runs the show for us. We started with the friends. It's friends of friends of friends. That's where the scale happened for us. Specifically, and it's crossing the state. It's now crossing the borders. It's because Madhu is there. It's now crossing borders. That's where they're coming. So the social capital is something. It runs the show for us. And quoting an example from our recent experience. So what we have identified right now, this is due to this pandemic. There are a lot of online classes started for schools and even for the government schools, but internet facility and a smartphone is still a luxury in India. Most of the students doesn't have it in villages. So we thought that how to make them engaging in the learning process so that they are not left out. So, we came up with a concept where we started connecting one college student to a one government school student through a normal phone call daily for half an hour. A normal phone call where they teach 5 new English words, one moral story, and then one small activity. This just started, and then we started for the small students in a small village for 15 students. Organically, it is now grown, and you see right now we are reaching more than 500 plus government school students, where college students from 100 colleges are actually started doing this. So it is all actually started spreading organically to the social capital. And we saw from even other states who are coming in for collaboration. This is nice, and we also see a lot of government schools in our area. Well, let's collaborate. You have a model. I will ask my friends to come in. Let's pull in together, and then let's make sure that no child is left out. So, as you correctly said, it is all about sharing the resources, sharing the social capital, which is really, really important in the social entrepreneur setup. And I would really say that the learning should also be cross borders. Like how we are going in, the north and global south. So in that case, there are a lot of learning experiences and best practices can be taken and then take it forward. So I think so. Networking, social capital runs social entrepreneurship. In one word, yeah.
For me, this was a huge masterclass for me, and I've been extremely lucky to sit and listen to the discussion that was happening. And I would not want to close this discussion, but of course, everything runs by time. So for me, I would like to first thank Dr. Emma and Ram for taking the time out to spend and talk about social enterprise, and especially youth and social enterprise. And I think it's a subject that needs to be brought out more into the mainstream, where many people take choose a career that solves the social or the sustainable challenge, while at the same time they're able to find a living for themselves. And I think both of you, over your broad discussion, touched upon interesting facets across this concept of social enterprise. So I'd like to thank you both for taking your time out and talking. And we hope that the audience that were able to participate with us also found the discussion interesting. In case of any questions, you can always leave it on the chat, and we can mail it to the panelists, and they can always get back to you. But yeah, overall, that would be a thanks from my side. And thank you, Ram. Thank you, Dr. Emma. I hope it was nice for you both to participate as well.
Thank you, Madhu. It was my pleasure. It was so interesting to learn, also from a practice perspective, how, and also from the organization of Talent Quest for India. I think it's a fascinating organization. I would like to also learn more about what you guys do.
Great. Thank you so much, Emma, for taking time out, for spending time. So there are a lot of students have been in YouTube chat. They have been asking questions and you have been answering. So I think so that will stay there, and we will take this whole session whenever we go for youth and social entrepreneurial mindset. I'll make sure that I will take bits from whatever you told, and I will for the students to for learn it. So that's the whole point of recording and going on live, to make sure that they get a global north perspective for the social entrepreneurship. So thank you so much, Emma, for your time, for your
thank you for having me.
Yeah, great. Emma, actually you are the host right now, so you need to actually at the top can you see a live YouTube or something like that at the top on your left corner? Just press down that and stop YouTube live.